Hi, if you're a PDI who is struggling with their Part 3 test, then this video is really going to resonate with you, and it's going to start to give you solutions to make things massively simpler. I'm Jeff, and I am passionate about helping trainee driving instructors to pass their ADI exams. Whether you want to train yourself to be a driving instructor or you are already training with a driving school, we have loads of resources and courses to help you. Like our video library, which I have now upgraded to include PDI training sessions. And the short video you're going to watch next are just snippets from a 2-hour Zoom training session I recently did with Tom, who has graciously allowed me to share it with you. Unfortunately, his experiences are far too common, and you may be feeling the same way yourself. He had failed his Part 3 test twice, and was struggling to understand client-centered learning and the 17 competencies. After using our content and courses, though, the quality of his lessons has improved significantly, and it's made him massively more confident in passing his next Part 3 test. If you want to watch Tom's 2-hour training session, which is broken down into 18 short videos, plus all of our other training videos, then just simply click on the description that you'll find in the information below. Then, for less than 40 pence a day, you'll be able to get access to hundreds of examples of real lessons delivered by me to my students, covering every subject involved in driver training, help on how to become an advanced driver and pass your Part 2 exam, and both Zoom and in-car training sessions with PDIs to help you improve your teaching abilities. Once you subscribe, you have unlimited access to all of the videos, and you can watch them on any device, anytime, and re-watch them over and over again. And if, like Tom, you would like to join me on a Zoom training session, whether that's recorded or not, then just simply email me. Again, you can find my email address in the information below.
I'm glad you're wearing Under Armour today, Jeff. I would have felt a little bit out of place otherwise.
Sorry, say that again.
I said, I'm glad you're wearing Under Armour. What you always wear in your videos.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm a big Under Armour fan. Yeah.
I wouldn't have recognised you otherwise.
Anyway, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. It just feels like it's been a long time. I think what I've learned is basically I failed on my planning. And also I over-instruct as well.
That's very common.
So what I really struggle with is I'm 52 years old and I've always been told what to do and I've always told people what to do, and usually you get results. So, but to all of a sudden them to turn around to you and say, you're teaching the wrong way, you've got to be teaching another way. It's so hard to get used to. It's trying to change the whole way that you talk or interact with someone. It's very difficult, and that's what I've struggled with the most.
Yeah, I understand.
And I eventually got my pink badge. I'm on my second pink badge now, actually, so I've been teaching for nearly a year.
Okay.
I've got hundreds of hours with pupils. I've had 3 passes, so I'm not doing too badly, but it's just those little areas where I just need to perfect, and the areas where I need to perfect is client-centered learning.
Okay.
And trying to find anything out there about client-centered learning is really quite difficult. So I've read all the books, I've looked at the videos and stuff, and that's how I stumbled across your site. It was just literally searching client-centered learning. Because what I struggle with as well is the 17 competencies. They just scare the hell out of you, don't they? And when you break it down into 3, it's, oh, I can do that. I struggle with 17, but I can definitely do 3. And when you look at it, they're all in there anyway, aren't they? So instead of just focusing on 17, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, doing the 3 is a lot helpful. And I know I've done your course, I've just finished it and everything, and I've really enjoyed it. And I've managed to take it out onto the road as well. And I feel like I've improved, and had a couple of students say they felt like it's been a bit better as well.
Okay, great.
Because I'm asking more questions and giving them more voice and trying to work things out for themselves, really.
Similar to yourself, for a lot of people, when you throw a bit of terminology at something like client-centered learning, if people aren't familiar with that term, don't really understand what it means, it can really throw people off balance.
Right.
It feels this is obviously a thing. It's a thing to do with driving instructor training, and it's a thing that I'm going to have to get my head around, and it's a new piece of learning that I'm going to have to take on board. But in reality, I think for the vast majority of us, we've probably had exposure to some form of client-centered learning practices, either on the giving or the receiving end, without necessarily even being aware of it. Is you have to combine open questions, which is what we're talking about, with active listening. If you do one without the other, it's of no value, because it's what comes out of the student's mouth and it's what they are showing you with their body language, which then becomes all important. If you're not, don't worry about it. But have you come across you probably would have done in the course anyway, but have you come across the term learning pyramid?
Yes, I have. Yes, but I can't remember too much about it.
So I can't remember exactly how many stages it's normally broken down into. It's worth checking. You can just Google image it if you like.
Yeah.
So basically, we've got passive learning, which is the top half of the pyramid. And then we've got active learning, which is the bottom half of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And as driving instructors, we very much want to be down in the bottom half of the pyramid. So typically, little examples would be if you ask somebody a question and you just leave silence hanging in the air for a moment, what you'll often get with students is this. Now they're thinking. Let them think. Their brain is whirring away. They're trying to come up with something. Ultimately, they might finish that little pause by going, I don't know. That's fine. That's a valid answer. If they don't know, they don't know. That's your then opportunity to jump in and help, because you now know there's a knowledge gap there that needs to be filled. Or they might disappear inside their heads for a few moments and come back and go, they'll say something. Now, the something they say might be completely and utterly wrong in terms of the question that you ask them. But again, that's a valid answer. It's an incorrect answer, but it's a valid answer, because now you know they're thinking in the wrong direction. So therefore, that gives you the opportunity to reroute their thinking in the correct direction.
Yeah.
Or you might get the student disappearing inside their head for a few moments and then coming back with something that's music to your ears. Okay. Then that's your opportunity to give them confirmation and affirmation that, yeah, you're right. So it doesn't matter what the starting point is, as long as you use active listening, you're watching their body language, you're picking up on any signs that they're thinking, they're stressing, they're struggling, they're tense, for whatever reason, it then gives you the opportunity to just wait and see what happens next. Now, within the space of probably no more than about 20 minutes, they've witnessed and practiced the parallel part probably 4 times. And by the end of it, they've gone from absolutely fearing it and dreading it and feeling like it was really complicated to actually, it's pretty straightforward, really, isn't it? But they've done most of that discovery for themselves. All you've done is facilitated that learning and development by asking questions to understand where they're coming from, any points of confusion, and you've just checked in after each little burst of practice to assess and sense whether they feel any development is taking place. And you acknowledge and confirm where development is going on, but it also gives you the opportunity to assist with helping their development more if they're lacking in some way. Now, in essence, that is what client-centered learning is about. It's what 17 Competences is about, but it's also what discovery, clarity, and practice is about. It's all the same thing. Pointless ramming information, jargon, acronyms down a student's throats because that's the way that you've been trained that you should deliver a driving lesson. And the student is just sitting there, bewildered, confused, struggling to remember what it is that you're telling them because there's so much of it. And probably not long into that conversation, they're switching off. Their brains go into overload and they just start to filter it all out. So you're sitting there like a talking head, maybe for 10 minutes, maybe with your visual diagrams out, going through what you were told you needed to in terms of a briefing. So they've got all of these bullet points in their heads and they've looked at all of these various different options and possibilities on a diagram. And their head, they won't say this to you, but their head is, and then you're trying to put it into practice. So that is the opposite, if you like, of client-centered learning. That's you being the subject matter expert and turning around to the student and saying, look at this picture, listen up, you've got a lot to learn. So then you're getting even more frustrated and you're thinking, they're not getting it. They're not getting it. Why aren't they getting it? The reason they're not getting it is because of what I just said, they're not engaged. Is this making sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. As I said, I've been doing this for only 2 years, but the amount of stuff I've read and watched and done, I've done hundreds of hours of this is what you should do. But as I said, there's no one really telling you what client-centered learning is. They talk about it a lot, but there's not enough examples. So even just watching your videos, the amount of examples that you come up with is very clever, but not just, you probably say that it's not being clever, it's just you listening and then trying to break down what the student needs to develop. I didn't think of that. I Google searched that so many times. How can I do this? How can I do that? And I never got anything back. I've asked loads of people, never got anything back. And that little exercise that you did, which only took sort of 10 minutes, was like brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, in my experience, having gone through a very almost traumatic training experience myself about 19 years ago, but realizing that actually that's still a very commonplace style of training PDIs. The industry hasn't really moved on. I know a lot of people like you, when they go through their training, I'm presuming you go, obviously your friend was helping you, but you go through quite a sort of systematic process in terms of what it is that you have to learn, you have to know, the industry jargon, the acronyms, how to explain them, etc., 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 etc. And the training is all about getting information from their head into your head. And even though they might be very client-centered in their teaching that they have with their students, they're not very client-centered when it comes to training PDIs, because the industry almost has forced them through years of repeated practice to go down that same very tactical, very linear, very modulaic process full of content, acronyms and jargon, which we're all told as PDIs are essential for us to use. Because if we don't get a student understanding what the MSPSL routine is, or they don't know what LADA is, or they don't go through the DSSM whenever they jump in a car, then they're not doing it right. So when we start teaching students, because we've been trained in that way, we've been told all of this stuff is important, why on earth would you then want to give a client-centered lesson? Because you've been told the first time you get a student in a car with you, you have to teach them how to set themselves up correctly, and you have to go through the cockpit drill, which means you have to go through the DSSM, which means you have to explain what the D is, what the first S, what the second S, what the third S is, and what the M means. And you have to go through that in depth and detail, and you have to use this diagram to show them how to do that correctly. You're treating them like a dumb animal. It's like they've never, ever been in a car before. Now, of course, they've all been in a car probably thousands of times. And without even necessarily thinking about it, but they probably have been thinking about it because they've been preparing to learn how to drive, they know what a seatbelt is. They know there are mirrors in the car on the outside. They might not know how to adjust them, but they know they're there. They know what a steering wheel is. They know that a seat moves. They might not necessarily know which directions or how it moves. If you point to a gear stick, they'll know it's a gear stick. If you point to a handbrake, they'll know it's a handbrake. They know there are 3 pedals down their feet. They may well know what order they're in and what they do. They might not. So rather than getting out your visual diagram and taking them through the DSSM routine, assuming that they know absolutely nothing, why don't you start off with a question and say, okay, jump yourself in the driving seat. What do you think you would need to do in order to get yourself set up in a nice, safe and comfortable driving position? Just show me. Have a fiddle about with stuff. The engine's not on. You can't brake anything. Just try it out. Think of the car as being a new piece of tech. If I were to give you a new smartphone, how would you learn how to use that? Would you download the instructor manual first and read that front to back? Or would you just dive in and start having a play about with the functions and the apps? Oh, I'll just dive in and have a play about. Treat the car the same way. Show me what you know. And then once I know what you know, I can help you fill in the gaps. Compared to what often happens is at the very first lesson, when you're in the practice area, the first 40, 45 minutes to an hour is taken up with the DSSM routine and the cockpit drill. Now, if you think about it from a student's point of view, how deadly dull and boring is that?
Yeah, I've done a few of them.
And it's so typical. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm not being critical of you. I'm being critical of the way that people like you get trained. So it doesn't surprise me, and I hear it far too frequently, that people like you come out of the training process with just a complete wrong idea and concept in their heads as to how they should teach a learner in a client-centered way. But for example, I very rarely ever mention MSPSL as an acronym to a student, or even the MSM routine. I can guarantee you, when they get to test standard and they're taking their test, they all do the MSPSL routine. They do it consistently and they do it consistently well. But they never heard the acronym. No idea. If I asked them what it meant, they wouldn't have a clue. Do they need to know? The examiner's not going to ask them if they know the MSPSL routine. All they're going to do is look and see if they're doing it. I'm a big advocate of getting learners to do as much of the teaching as possible.
Yeah, they learn really quickly that way.
Yeah, it's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I don't know what I'm doing. It's not that I can't instruct. But in my experience, if you give the responsibility for the learning into their hands, they want to pick that up and run with it. And that is the essence, again, of client-centered learning. That's the essence of discovery, clarity, and practice. It's the bottom half of the learning pyramid. It's active learning, not passive learning. It's getting them to discover the solutions and then you affirming or confirming whether those solutions are correct or not.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the $1 million question.
Yeah, sure.
Is how many hours does your students take to pass roughly? I know you can't put an actual figure on it, but because that's the $1 million question, they all ask me, how many hours do you think I'll pass it?
Okay.
You're very client-centered, so I imagine it's a lot lower than mine, so I'm quite interested.
Okay, so yeah, I will answer your question directly, but let me start off by saying I very rarely get asked that question.
Really?
Yeah, I wouldn't say never, but rarely. Because it's very rare for me. Almost all of my students come to me because they've been recommended by one of their friends, or I taught their elder sibling.
Yeah.
So they're already looking forward to having driving lessons with me because they've been told, and a bit braggy, that I'm a great instructor and I'm really going to enjoy having driving lessons. So they're just looking forward to the experience. They're not worried about whether it's going to take 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 hours. They're just looking forward to having lessons. And once they enjoy their first lesson, they're looking forward to their next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So the question of how many hours becomes almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want you to pass as quickly as possible, but for me, my job isn't to get you to pass your test. It's to get you to drive safely, confidently, and competently on your own once you've passed your test. The test is just a barrier that we need to get through to get you to that point. Now, I wouldn't want you to go and sit your test until I felt and you recognized yourself, you would be safe, confident, and competent driving on your own if you were to pass your test. Yeah, that's my benchmark.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I've really enjoyed that.
Good. Has it been useful? That's the main thing.
Oh, definitely. And I think I accidentally pressed record at the beginning, so I've recorded it so I can go back and have a listen again. I hope you don't mind.
No, this is recording. No, absolutely. If you've recorded it as well, that's absolutely fine. If you find you haven't got access to the recording, just let me know and I'll give you access to my recording.
But no, thank you very much. And I've really enjoyed the course. And even this morning, I started again. I'm watching the videos again and doing the assessments again. But yeah, it's just given me a better idea of client-centered learning. And there is that word, is that conversation. That's huge. Is start a conversation, see what you can find out, and then work from there.
So if I've heard you, because let me practice what I preach now. So if I'm just tuned into your feedback there correctly, what I've heard is you found this session useful, you found the course very useful, and you feel like you've got a better understanding now of client-centered learning, and you've realized that a big part of that is about having conversations.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there anything else that you feel like you've taken away or is still not making sense for you, other than obviously you still need to continue to practice?
Yeah, I think also it's just about believing in yourself, isn't it? And whatever methods you use, you've got to believe in those methods. If it does mean stopping for 5 minutes and having a chat, even though you might think, examiner's eyes are boring into the back of your neck, come on, get going. If you feel that's going to develop and help the pupil, you've got to do it. Die by your sword sort of thing. But yeah, I've definitely learned a lot. And what I really struggled with was, because I didn't believe it. I didn't really believe in client-centered learning because I couldn't do it. But I do believe in it now.
Good. Just a bit of feedback for you in terms of my prior experiences working with PDIs is once they start to use my methodology and then they get to their part 3 test, quite often what they'll say when we're having our own private little conversation afterwards and I'm getting some feedback from them, I asked them how nervous they felt. Typically they say really nervous to begin with, but as soon as I started working with the student, the moment we started having those conversations and as soon as the wheels started to get rolling, to be honest, I forgot the examiner was there.
So I can't remember where, it really towards the end of the course, and you completely shocked me when you swore and you said, fuck the examiner. I was like, what? Jeff just swore. And no, that's right. And I think that's the kind of thing I need to get into my head is obviously don't say it to them, but in my head, no, it's about the student. They're secondary.
And again, with the PDI that I was working with, I was having a conversation with him on the phone on the morning of his part 3 test. I knew what he was going to be working on. I wasn't there with him. And I just checked in and said, how are you feeling? Give me a percentage. Where are you at the moment in terms of passing this test? He went 50-50. Honestly, he said, yeah, 50-50, no more than that. Okay, let's try and make it 80-20 in your favor. I said, all I want you to do is one thing and one thing only. And I'll repeat it. Fuck the examiner, concentrate on the student. Now, he was the sort of person, a little bit like you, he'd been running his own business for a number of years. So he was very used to giving commands, to giving orders, telling people specifically what he wanted them to do and how he wanted them to do it, because he knew that was going to get the result that he was looking for. And he really struggled in getting his head around client-centered learning, couldn't understand it, it didn't make sense. And we even got into a bit of a heated conversation once about it. He passed with an A grade. And I checked in with him afterwards. I said, that's amazing, fantastic, brilliant, well done. I wasn't expecting that based on the conversation that we had this morning. I said, what was different? What shifted it for you? He went, I followed your advice. I made it all about the student. And he said, I after the conversation with you this morning, I thought back into my work days, and quite often, even though I was the boss, I used to mentor people. And when I was mentoring them, I would ask them questions, because I know they didn't know how. I didn't get my words out. I knew that they didn't know how to do their job yet. So I had to find out from them what they wanted help with most, so I could get them to do the job to the best of their ability. And then suddenly, after we had that chat this morning, the light bulb came on. I thought, that's all I need to do with this student. So that's all I did. I just mentored her. And it just worked. And I said, why has it taken so long to get that light bulb switching on? He said, I don't know, Jeff, but it's on now.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is I'm so focused on the examiner. That's my fear, just the examiner. And no, you're not teaching, not facilitating the examiner. You're there for the pupil, and you just got to try to forget about them and do the job that you know you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as soon as you said that was a bit like a light bulb moment for me. So I am going to literally ignore that person in the back.
Yeah, I don't often swear, but sometimes I think it really rams the message home.
No, it did. It definitely rammed home for me, because I don't often swear either. And I was like, oh, but it's good. But no, thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate today. Thank you for taking the time out. No, I got a great deal out of today, and I'll definitely be rewatching it again. And I've got 6 weeks, but I've got all this information. I'm going to put it into practice. And yeah, I'm going to go for my A grade. So thank you.
Good. And if you do need any more help, just reach out.
I will do. I appreciate it.
Okay. Cheers, Tom. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah. All the best.
Thank you very much. Fingers crossed.
Okay, thanks.
Cheers,
Okay, so that's it from me. And as always, thanks for watching. Keep safe, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.